to Adelaide. So is this a real tourist train or just regular transportation train?
Yeah, it's a real kind of luxury accommodation train. It was a freight train for the first kind of 50 years of its existence, and it was sort of the only way that you could sort of get materials from Adelaide to Darwin. And it also follows the telegraph route, which was the first kind of Morse code signal line through the middle of Australia. And then in the early 2000s, they reinvented it from its kind of haulage role into a luxury sleeper train. So now it's a kind of a five-star hotel on wheels and the perfect setting for a murder mystery.
Absolutely true. So I haven't been on the Orient Express, but I have been on Rovos Rail in South Africa, which is a reincarnation with some difficulty because of the gauge of the tracks of a Victorian train. It stops at the Kimberley Diamond Mines, so you get to go out and see all that. I love train travel. There is a another Australian mystery writer called Sulari Gentle. I don't know if you know Sulari.
Yeah,
Um,
I know Solari very well.
well, she was my author until we sold Poison Pen Press. So she wrote The Woman in the Library. She has a new book coming out next month. But Sulari, when she left here on her U.S. book tour for The Woman in the Library, met her sister and went on the murder on the Orient Express so she could write about it. And I love the comment that you made here because it's exactly what she said to me. You said, I am grateful to the truly exceptional staff of the Ghan, who didn't once call the police as I questioned them on the feasibility of various murders. So
Yeah.
I can
So we
imagine.
took the trip and I was particularly fascinated with the meat freezer in the kitchen. I wanted to know if you might put a body in it. And I was sort of asking, what would you do with the meat freezer if it was a murder mystery? And they sort of looked at me a little bit side-eyed, and then I remembered I should probably tell them that I'm writing a novel before I ask questions about hiding bodies on the train. So
Excellent point. Now, is the train so constructed that you couldn't just roll a body off the train to disappear off into the bush?
oh, you probably could, but it would be a short novel. So I was
Yeah,
looking for inventive solutions.
I understand that. Right. It would have been a 20, not even a novella, a short story. So you can also probably see the diagram of how the car is laid out. Um, so why don't you tell us who you have put on the train? Because I think there's a wonderful cast there.
Yeah, so it's a sequel to Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, which is stars Ernest Cunningham, and he loves Golden Age murder mysteries. And what happens is he finds himself in the middle of a Golden Age murder mystery and has to solve it. And so this is the sequel, but it's a standalone sequel in the same way that all Golden Age murder mysteries are. Same detective, new case kind of thing. So Ernest has since written down what happened to him the last time, and he's been invited to a writers' festival taking place on this train. And there's six writers on the train, including him, and he's struggling to come up with an idea for what his second book will be. But on the first night, one of the writers is murdered, and the remaining five decide that they've all, because they've spent a career writing crime fiction, they've all got the skills of their fictional detectives. And if they all put them to the task, they might be the best suited to solving the murder. So, and Ernest thinks that he might have his second book sort of coming to life. So the five remaining writers become five detectives as they all apply their skills in writing murder mysteries to solving them. But the real problem or question of the book is that, of course, if everybody knows how to solve a murder, they also know how to get away with one. So how do you find a killer on a train where every single person on it knows how to construct and get away with the perfect murder? Is the conundrum that faces Ernest as he investigates all the other crime writers.
Wow, you must have been mainlining not just Agatha Christie, but Anthony Horowitz. I mean,
Yes,
in a way, it's kind of a metafiction way of doing it, isn't
yeah, absolutely. So Ernest talks to the reader. He talks you through, basically, he presents it as a fair play mystery. And he'll talk you through the clues as he goes along because he's sort of writing down what happened to him on the train, and you are part of the detective team. I believe that team up between the reader and the author is so important, and that's the metafictional. And I love the Horowitz novels. I absolutely adore them. And it's really interesting in the Hawthorne books. Horowitz is the Watson to Detective Hawthorne. In my books, Ernest is both Holmes and Watson. So he chronicles and solves at the same time, which is a really interesting and fun thing to play with, because in the Holmes books, Holmes doesn't tell Watson things. So Watson is writing things down for the reader, but Holmes is saving them for the end when he can reveal that he knew it all along. Ernest can't do that. He can't trick you like that. So he has to be the Watson, which means he has to tell the truth to the reader, but he also has to be the Holmes, which means you have to solve it. And what that does is, I think the metafiction kind of brings you into the mystery a bit, makes you the co-detective. So I have a lot of fun with that.
Well, of course you did. And we can go into the rules, the golden age rules of mystery here in a minute. But I was thinking, since we talked about Agatha Christie, Poirot had a secondary guy called Hastings, but Hastings did not tell Poirot those are not, I'm trying to remember, because it's been a while since I read them. Those are told in third person, aren't they?
Yeah, isn't one of them in first person? I'm a bit foggy on it too, but right. I think the storytelling device that you choose, I mean, the Holmes and Watson chronicling, or the kind of third person detective nature, is an important choice, because it's how you're relaying how the mystery is solved. And I think it grandly affects multiple books. Christie herself, not the Poirot novels, but narration is such a key facet of several of her mysteries. Without spoiling them, that's a choice, and if you make that choice correctly, you can really present your mystery in a really fantastic and immersive way.
Well, Roger Ackroyd would be a great example, but for anybody who hasn't read it, I don't want to spoil it by saying, why. I think so. So oddly enough, by pure chance, I am doing an event at the bookstore tonight instead of home in my library with the host of the All About Agatha podcast, who has written his first mystery, and it's very much kind of like an Agatha Christie. And he talks about, and it's apropos to this, because he's a ghost, he's got a ghostwriting sleuth. But anyway, somewhere in there, he talks about the fact that both Holmes and Poirot have not assistants, but whatever you want to call it, Hastings and Watson and so forth, and therefore they don't really tell the story, and they're not necessarily always clued in. But then he goes on to say, and I absolutely love this, he said, but Miss Marple worked alone. And I thought it was so perfect, because that really is a big difference. She has her nephew who's in the police, but basically Miss Marple is working alone. I think it's a great title for a book. Miss Marple Works Alone is a title I wish somebody would write. It's so good. Anyway,
yeah, she sounds a little like Jack Reacher when you describe her like that. I think it's really fascinating. I think just constructing a book in which your detective works alone, they have to, or one of the things that I try and do is they have to have someone to talk to, because they've got to sort of explain and think and have some dialogue, so you're just not all interior. So one of the things that I find fun is who do I buddy up with Ernest? He doesn't have a kind of mainstay offsider chronicler, but who do I buddy up Ernest with so that the mystery moves along with a little bit of that snap and a little bit of that back and forth that might be missing if he was just on his own the whole time. So I populate people around him to fill those kind of gaps.
Well, he does have a love interest who snaps in at the end, which is really kind of great and sums things up in some respects, but we won't talk about it. So this is not a fan conference on the train. This is a writers conference, right? So the people with Ernest are writers. So have you given them different genres? Are they writing different kinds of mysteries? What are they?
Yeah. So it's a crime writing festival. So they're all walks of the crime writing spectrum. So there's a legal thriller writer, there's a forensics thriller writer, Ernest is the non-fiction, because in the world of the books, he's writing non-fiction, even though I'm writing fiction. There is the literary prize-winning writer. There's the kind of blockbuster sensationalist writer. And there's the psychological suspense, or kind of, psychologist kind of writer as well. So the idea that I had there was, in having them from all walks of different crime writing genres, is that they'd all have a different skill that they could add to the investigation. And what I wanted to do was, once one of them dies, sort of be like a Power Ranger of all of the different skills just kind of coming together into one great detective. But what actually happens is their own egos get in the way and they sort of race to solve it. But they've each got skills that the others can use. The psychological suspense writer is really good at weighing up the suspects and interpreting their personalities. The forensics writer, he says, oh, I wrote a book about, I'll do the autopsy, even though he's got no skills. And he's like, oh, I wrote a book about this particular method of murder, and so I can tell you if it applies to the body. And the legal person steps in with some of the law and stuff. So they're all resources to Ernest, and that's why they're so different and so varied, because they represent different sections of the crime writing sphere, which I think is everything that Ernest really needs to solve the case.
So the guest of honor on this is one Henry McTavish, globally best-selling author of the Detective Moribund series. I have to say that Detective Moribund is a really brilliant name for a mystery series. I love it. You just left out the I.
Yeah, I would guess so. I didn't even really think that. I'm really bad with names. I just kind of pick them and pluck them.
You did it on purpose. And, moribund, I thought was absolutely wonderful for a whole lot of reasons, again, some of which we can't go into. But you even have a quote from the New York Times describing his success. Unputdownable and unbeatable, McTavish is peerless, says the New York Times. So all the other writers are going to have very mixed feelings about Henry McTavish. And he also has, if we went back to the diagram of the train, he is basically flying first class while the rest of them are kind of in coach, right?
Yeah, so he gets his entire own cabin, like a whole section of the train is devoted to him. And you're right, everybody on the train, has different opinions of McTavish. Ernest is really excited to meet him. He's a big fan. And as the old adage goes, don't meet your heroes. Maybe McTavish isn't what Ernest had hoped he might be when he meets him in person. So it was really, really fun playing with that kind of celebrity role that McTavish plays in that, just kind of aped up to the maximum, with his indulgences and his own cabin and these best-selling books and that review that he gets in the book as well.
Well, I think, if you have 6 people, this is basically a variation on the locked room mystery too. I mean, this is a locked train mystery, and there's propulsion in the plot because the train is moving. It's going from Darwin to Adelaide, and so there's a sort of a ticking clock. Will this all get resolved before the train gets to Adelaide? It stops somewhere, doesn't it? Does it stop in Alice Springs?
Yeah, it stops a couple of times. The great thing, like you say, is the ticking clock. Can you solve this murder before the train pulls into the final station? And it stops at Alice Springs, which is where there's sort of a dinner under the stars, which has brings everyone together in some calamitous fashion, and has one of my favorite scenes of the book between Ernest and his girlfriend Juliet, because this isn't spoiling anything, but Ernest is fastidious on the rules of mystery fiction. So he believes that everything should play out the way that it should in a book, and he's aware that this is a sequel, and he believes that no main characters from the first novel could be the killer in a sequel, because it doesn't wash. It's not fair, is his kind of thing. But so he refuses to acknowledge that his girlfriend might be a suspect. And it all kind of comes to a head at this dinner. So it stops in Alice Springs, and then it also stops in a town called Cooper Pedy, which is an opal mining town in the middle of Australia where everybody lives underground. So it's too hot to build a house on the surface. So they tunnel into the hillsides and underground basically like hobbits, and they've got, just the door in the side of the hill. And all around the town is the pockmarks of the opal mining sites, which are just kind of 20-meter deep, just boreholes in the ground every kind of 2 meters, because they're just looking for that opal jackpot. And they get off there. And that's exciting as well, because it's a very dangerous part of the countryside. If you fall in one of those holes, you are done. So there's a few fun scenes there. One of the funnest things about writing a train mystery, as you say, as a locked room, is, of course, everybody's trapped together, and you can sort of have fun as an author. You settle your characters and you see what they might do to each other. But one of the things that I really enjoy about any piece of fiction that's set on a mode of transportation is that the quest, almost the whole time, the quest for the protagonist sort of focuses on, how do I get out of this? So think about anything where they're stuck on a plane or whatever. How do I get out of it? And the one moment that I really love in all of these kind of transport mysteries is when they do get out of it, and then they realize they've got to get back into it. So there's a great scene where Ernest manages to get off the train and then goes, I have to get back on. And that's really fun as well. So I'm sort of locking and unlocking the doors of the locked room mystery on and off again as he gets on and off the train. And I couldn't write a novel on a train without an homage to, all those great Back to the Future Part 3, running alongside the train kind of fun things that are iconic when you're dealing with a locomotive barreling through the desert.
So I have to say that this is a luxury train, and therefore it has a couple of essentials that an awful lot of modern trains don't have, because they just give you sandwiches and a Coke or something. But this train has a bar and a restaurant. And therefore, people can mingle. I mean, I just rode on a luxury train in Canada. I've been on trains all over the world, and it's a sad trend towards, reducing the catering to, sandwiches and whatever it is. But if you're on a train for 2 or 3 days, people do expect, and they're paying, to have a more civilized experience. And I think that, that's important for your book, that, they weren't all just getting drinks out of a machine and whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the bar and the restaurant carts are both sort of essential to the storytelling in the way they allow the characters to mingle. The thing I noticed when I went on the Ghan for research was it is very luxurious, and it's a train. Like, it's quite small. So if you've got kind of 10 characters and you want them all to crisscross, they can't just sit in their carriages for the whole book. It would be really, really boring. So how do you kind of bring that to life? And the bar and the restaurant serve a lot of functions there, as does Henry McTavish's, as you say, his kind of suite cabin. That's a real carriage, but it's not often connected to the Ghan. So I moved that from another train called the Indian Pacific, where it's more frequent, and put it onto my train because I wanted the location and I wanted the room. And such is, for people like yourself who are a fan of trains, there's an apology at the back of the book that says, look, I did my best with the technical details, but people who like trains, they know a lot about trains. And so I apologize for any carriages I've moved, any things I've added, any doors that shouldn't open that do in the book, that's on me. But it's all in the service of, making the characters, putting them in environments that are exciting to read about, and having them crisscross in the way that you need in a murder mystery.
So we're talking about trains. The Rocky Mountaineer that goes from Vancouver to Banff, which is a wonderful train. They actually get you off the train and make you spend the night in a Holiday Inn in Kamloops. So they feed you in like breakfast and lunch, and I think possibly tea, but they don't have an overnight. They don't have sleeper cars and, dinners. So you actually have to get off. And the same is true with the Glacier Express in Switzerland, which goes to St. Trying to remember, it goes to St. Moritz. But anyway, it's the same deal. You get on and they give you wonderful food, and, you're in a glass dome car and all the rest of it. But there is no overnight accommodation. Whereas Rovos Rail that I mentioned in South Africa, you actually sleep on the train, and they do provide the bar and the restaurant. And then there's a I do train travel all day. My favorite train actually goes from Lake Titicaca to Cusco, and it's all day, but they have a bar car and a restaurant. And what happens is that most people hang out the back of the train. You're riding, it's like the fish that swam backwards because you want to be seeing all the stuff along the side and the market, they take down the markets, and when the train passes by they pop back up again. So when you're off the back of the train you can see all the vendors and so forth leaping back onto the tracks. I mean, train travel is really perfect for mysteries. But let's talk a little bit about the rules for writing stories. Now, you detective stories, you actually quote Rule 9 from S.S. Van Dyne, his 20 rules for writing detective stories from 1928, which is an American Golden Age mystery. But the real Golden Age rules were written by Father Ronald Knox for the Detective Club in Britain. And I've been lucky enough to be invited to join not to be a member, but to attend some of the Detective Club things. And my favorite of all those rules is no doppelgangers, which I see that, no identical twins, no Chinaman, which is probably offensive today, but basically what it was to say is you can't wish all this off on, foreigners or people outside the circle. But that was basically a fair play thing, is that you had to present all the clues and give the reader a fighting chance to work out what was happening before we get to the end. And so you had these guardrails that the mystery writer was supposed to do. And a lot of people read those early Golden Age mysteries as a mental challenge. I mean, it wasn't there just to sort of sit back and enjoy it, but it was an actual test of, your deductive powers. And do you know about the British Library crime classics?
No, I don't.
Well, Poison Pen Press publishes them here in the United States. And Martin Edwards, who's won the Diamond Dagger and God knows how many.
Oh, yes, I've read. Yep.
Right. He's a lovely guy. And he and the British Library work together. But what they're doing is they're bringing back a lot of, I hate to say second tier because that's not really fair, but Golden Age mysteries that were written by authors who are not Agatha Christie and Dorothy Sayers and Josephine Tay and Marjorie Allingham, but nevertheless very good writers. And I've read, it's really fun to read them. They are so much slower in pace than we are accustomed to, today.
I think it's.
Sorry.
Oh, well, I think it's fascinating. I mean, the difference between modern novels and the sort of classic Golden Age. It's one of the reasons why I wrote these books, because I found Ronald Knox's 10 rules, which are quoted in the front of Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone.
Right.
And that's the character wants to follow those rules. And when I found the rules, I thought, almost everything these days is sort of breaking most of them. And that's just because of an evolution of the genre. That's not a lack of quality of right. The writing. It's not even a skill thing. It's just the genre has changed. So I thought, well, can I do a mystery like that and play it fair? And that's why Ernest, at the start of both books, he says, I'm something you don't see in crime fiction. I'm a reliable narrator and I will prove it to you. Here is what is going to happen, and all those kind of things. And I agree, the mental challenge of reading a mystery is so much fun. It's so fun to be invited into the puzzle and be a part of solving it. And I think 10% of people should be able to solve it. I mean, my books have twists in them and I hope that they surprise my readers. But if 5 to 10% of people can't solve it, I haven't given you enough information. I'm not playing fair, and I'm not on that track. They're also very, very different, as you say, about the differences in the pace and things. It's fascinating to me how long modern mystery novels have to be to sort of meet publishing contracts. And, I've got all my characters and I get halfway through the book and I'm thinking, well, Poirot would have solved it by now. And I've got to do a couple of extra murders because the length of books has changed. It's all those kind of subtle things that sort of change the actual presentation of the mystery. But on that fair play thing, I don't mind telling outright clues. You know, there's an anagram in this book that Ernest tells you multiple times what it is. I'll tell you on the Zoom. I don't, you know, it doesn't matter if you solve it before the book. Good on you. It's Archie Bench, and he's trying to figure out what the pseudonym Archie Bench goes with in the anagram. And he mentioned it multiple times. And right before he solves it, he stops the book and he says, "I'm going to give you one last shot at solving Archie Bench. And if you want to have a go, then we'll get into the finale. It's going to unlock the case." And the same thing in the first book, which I will spoil. Well, it's not really a spoiler, but Ernest says that people's names have meanings. And if you want to go and Google everybody's names and punch them into an anagram solver and spoil the book for yourself, write them all down and you will figure out some things. And one of the characters' names in the first book is an anagram of "I am not the killer." So it's these kind of things that Ernest will tell you this at the end. That's the kind of great pleasure of these golden age rule-based murder mysteries, is that the detective will solve it for you and they will explain it to you. You do not have to put the effort in. But if you do want to put the effort in, then you will be rewarded. And my books kind of try and say outright, look, if you want to look here and try and figure out this numerical code, this cipher, this anagram, it will reward you with some of the answers. But if you don't want to get out a pen and paper, sit back and I will explain it to you at the end. So I'm trying to have the best of both the modern worlds and the classic worlds at the same time.
Yeah, I just gave him all kinds of points earlier in our discussion about Inspector Morbund, which I thought was an actual clue, but it turns out, according to you, it's not. Anyway, I was giving you lots of points for that, but it is a clue.
Absolutely. Well, look, if it's a clever clue, I'll take it. It was intentional.
Yes, no, it's absolutely a clue. I mean, I thought it was brilliant. But here are three of the rules that are really important, that this kind of book follows if the reader is going to have a fair chance. One, nothing supernatural. It's not going to work if it turns out in the end that it was a ghost or, a dragon or something. That's out. Second, which we've already mentioned, no surprise twins, no doppelgangers, whatever. So that's an identity switch that is just not fair, if you're going to be doing that. And the third, and this is really important, is the killer must be introduced early on. If the killer does not appear in the book until towards the end, then the reader doesn't really have a shot. And there was a huge bestseller by a debut author here in the United States years ago, and everybody loved it, and because it broke some medical ground and all the rest of it, and hardly anyone noticed that the killer didn't appear until like 12 pages before the end. It was a thriller. It wasn't a detective story. It was a thriller, so you can get away with a little bit more. But it never really resonated with me as a book, because I thought that there was really no way that the reader could ever. It was strictly revelation, not detection for the reader. So,
which is, as you say, valuable in a certain sense in a genre. But yeah, if you're trying to solve it, it becomes impossible to solve. I think, and I take on that rule with great seriousness, that the killer must be introduced early and they must have a major role in the story. So we've sort of gone beyond the butler did it kind of things. And to do that in this book, Ernest says in the opening chapter, I'm going to use the killer's name 106 times. And you can count. This is one of those things. If you have a Kindle, you can control effort, you can get ahead of the plot. But, in all of this kind of rule following and honesty, it is honest and it is 106. But this is a murder mystery. Not everyone is who they say they are. So, if you've got multiple alliances, don't worry, there's no cheating doppelgangers in there. But you've got to add and subtract and think about what is the meaning of a name? Do people have nicknames? So you won't solve it if you control F the Kindle. But when you add them all up at the end, the answer is there and it has been there for you the whole time. And that was one of the great challenges of writing the book. Right before the end, the killer is mentioned 106 times, and Ernest counts them off several times during the book just to make sure that I'm playing fair with you. And right at the end, 5 characters are on 97 mentions. And that was an editorial nightmare, because my editor was like, I think we need a he said here. And I'm like, nope, because I can't use their name. And she's like, yeah, but the dialogue is confusing. And I'm like, I understand that. And I can't physically put their name in because they're on 97. And if I put them on 98, then people won't think they're a suspect. So it's all those kind of those fun things to properly address the fact that, yeah, you've got to have a main character and they've got to be it. I think that's a really great phrase of yours, that it's got to be detection, not revelation. It's the difference between an moment and a gotcha moment at the end of a detective book. So, it all slotted together and I see what happened versus, yeah, I'm surprised, but I feel got, which is also a great feeling depending on the book you're reading, but not what I'm going.
Well, you've had marvelous reviews. I'm going to quote for a moment here from the Wall Street Journal, which refers to this as a witty book, ratcheted up by well, I won't say what because it's good by growing resentment among the passengers, and that's certainly true. And then you got a wonderful review in the New York Times, and I thought I haven't got it here to quote, but at the end, I think it said something to the effect that its relationship between Ernest and his girlfriend, I keep wanting to call her Jennifer, but that's not it.
Juliet.
Juliet, thank you. Between Ernest and Juliet, that, really gives the book its weight. And I think that might have been engendered in part by the epilogue. But nonetheless, you did want Ernest to have some sort of personal relationship, that because I don't know exactly how to weigh against all the other relationships in the book.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is where I differ from the kind of Golden Age classics, is that Ernest has to have an arc in each book he's in. So it's not quite enough for me. And part of this is the styles of modern novels and as I said before, even just the length. But his personal growth in each book is really important. And he sort of says, you don't really read about the great detectives having PTSD about their last case. They just pick up a new intellectual puzzle and then they go on with it. And even the modern adaptations of Poirot and Holmes, all of those, they inject character arcs in those detectives between stories that they don't have in the originals. So, because they understand that the modern audience requires a certain kind of closed off character growth. So the classics, they'll pick up the new case. So Ernest needs kind of an emotional growth. But one of the great fun things in this book is that Ernest, in retelling the book, is often reminding us. So these books are in first person, and he says, well, I wrote this in first person, and there's normally a suspension of disbelief that somebody writing a murder mystery in first person just survives because we have to write it all down afterwards. But there's multiple times in his writing where you see that he says, oh, I'm sitting in a hospital room and I'm writing this out. Oh, they've moved me to the police station, I'm writing this out. And he sort of goes, well, whose story is this until it gets printed? I'm in first person now because I'm writing it and I'm talking to you, but I might not be talking to you by the time you're reading it. So I really wanted to play with that and whose story it was and how that can kind of come through with the expectations without cheating of a first person narrator. And I'm really glad that was reflected in that review because that was one of the most fun things to write and one of the most difficult things to pull off. So I hope people enjoy that little twist in the end as well.
I liked it very much. And I'm going to be launching Larry King's new Mary Russell and Sherlock Holmes books. And I say the bookstore, the Poison Pen. And it has a great deal of character arc for Holmes that was not ever explored in the Holmes books. We learn a lot about Irene Adler. We learn a lot about Holmes' family story and so forth. And it fits in with what you're saying, that, for a modern reader to flesh out more of Holmes, is a valuable thing. Anyway, everyone in my family has killed someone has just come out in paperback this winter. But I see, looking at my advanced reading, this is not the actual book. This is what I get to read early on, that you have written Find Us, Either Side of Midnight, and Green Light. So this is your fourth book. Were the first three fiction or what are they?
Yeah, they're fiction. So they're different. So the two of them, Find Us and I think Either Side of Midnight and another one. I'm not sure if that's on the inside of the cover. Last one to leave. They're Audible novellas. So they're short, twisty mysteries that are written for the Audible platform. And Greenlight was my first novel, which was published about 5 years ago. But they're very different. They're more thrillers than the deduction of the Ernest Cunningham books that I'm saying them. So Everyone in My Family's Killed Someone was sort of my debut into the US market, but I've been writing thrillers down here in Australia that Audible have sent out and published over there as well. And I was published, the first book, Greenlight, was actually published as Trust Me When I Lie by Source Books over there as well. So, but again, that was in the thriller space, and I've sort of moved slightly away from that.
Got it. Well, since you've done so well with Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone and Everyone on This Train Is a Suspect, are you in fact going to write a third book along these lines?
I am. So I'm committed to the Everyone series, is what I'm calling it. And the next one is called Everyone in This Something Is a Something. So I'm going with those kind of style of titles. They're super fun to write. They're I just have an absolute blast. And I think any writer will share the feeling that when someone's voice is sort of speaking to you off the page and your fingers are flying across the keys, you have to write it. You have to keep going. And I'm having so much fun with the stories in these books that I will keep doing them.
You know what I hope? We noticed during the pandemic that, and subsequently, that the section at the Poison Pen that grew the most and continues to sell very heavily is classics. And that doesn't include just, we thought it started out to be the British Library crime classics and then the Library of Congress crime classics. But now it's branched out and, we're doing, the Odyssey and all this other stuff. And I think it's wonderful that people had time to read or, during the pandemic and then decided to finally tackle War and Peace or Moby Dick or whatever it might have been. But the thing is that if you've read any of the earlier Golden Age mysteries, or, even if you only read Agatha Christie, this book will be much more fun for you and much more meaningful, I think. But conversely, if you read this book and you have a good time with it, it may also send you back to try some of the Golden Age mysteries that you might have overlooked. So, I think it's an interesting two-way kind of a thing here that you've tapped into and are encouraging. So I'm really happy about
it. Exactly. And I think, I wanted to build these books with as much affection as I could for the genre. And if it encourages people to pick up some classics, fantastic. And if they pick up my books because they like the classics, also fantastic. So yeah, it's just it's so cool that people are revisiting books, that maybe they picked up and put down 20 years ago, and then they've had the time to read them, as they say. But I think it's also fascinating how, because I did it as well. You read books that you've sort of had on the shelf and never picked up. How modern some of them feel, and how little really the world has changed in so many ways. That the books just absolutely hold up. So yeah, it's fantastic that those sections of bookstores and libraries are thriving.
Well, technology has obviously made some difference in motives for murder. I mean, it's really hard to have shame as a valid motive for murder if you're living currently in the United States. It's gone. People ask me, why did you call your bookstore the Poisoned Pen? And one reason is that Poison Pen had already been trademarked for a totally different company. And I had to get permission from the owner of Poison Pen in order to call it Poison Pen. But then people don't know about Poison Pen letters, which was basically Twitter back in the village, where people would send little gossipy, in order to stir up trouble and all the rest of it, or get revenge or make somebody jealous or whatever it might be, or even blackmail people. They would write Poison Pen letters. And we do that now. But anyway, I always liked, I think that shame was a thing that really has lost its. It's not as propulsive as it used to be in terms of, a motive. So the modern crime writer may have to come up with some different ones, but basically, human emotions are pretty much the same now as they were 100 years ago.
Yeah, well, I think, some of the writers in my books are afraid of getting cancelled. I guess that's a kind of modern interpretation, is the online cancellation. One of the fun things about setting this one on a train was that, technology has come a long way in how it serves both the world and detective fiction. And Ernest in this book gets on the train and then is in the middle of the desert, so doesn't get a phone. So which is a great shortcut to a crime writer, is that Ernest can't just look everything up. So I like that kind of sense of isolation, and I put a bushfire on the horizon, which all of the helicopters are busy dropping water on. So no lift off either. So yeah, one of the tricks of writing modern classics, or not that my books are classics, modern golden age style mysteries, is that how do you get out of everything that we have now? It's the classic horror movie conundrum where the person, oh no, my phone's run out of battery, oh what a shame that I can't call the police. How do you get out of that effectively to serve the story without your audience rolling their eyes and going, ugh, of course you got no reception, which is another thing that I play with Ernest in the first book. He mentions how much battery percentage everyone's phone has, because he says, I know we're in a murder mystery and I know we've all got mobile phones, and just so every time someone picks up a phone, he says 27%, 25%, so you can sort of count it down to that kind of predictable cliche of when the phone runs out of battery. So playing with it in new ways is super fun as well. But yeah, totally got to take the technology out to kind of do it well.
Well, I agree. I mean, God knows what AI is going to do to us, or virtual reality headsets, or whatever it all is, but that's a challenge for the crime writer, is, how to keep up with what's happening, but at the same time, stay with the basics. So I think at this point, Jacob, come and talk to us and see if we have any questions. Since we are doing the All About Agatha podcaster tonight, I will send you a link, because we stream all our events from the bookstore. It's just like this, except it's
fantastic.
It's actually
is that book called The Busybody?
Yes, yeah, it is.
Yes. And I think it comes out soon in Australia. I was keen to get a copy. So
well, I'm probably going to reprise some of what we've talked about this evening, this afternoon with him. But anyway, I'll send you.
Well, he'll be way. I don't know. He'll be more expert than I am, and you'll say, "Oh, Benjamin and I talked about this morning," and he'll say, "Oh, Benjamin is wrong."
In the first place, I'm sure he's far more tactful than that. In the second place, it won't be the same conversation. But I do think, Martin Edwards and I, because he's my author until we sold Poison Pen Press. He was my author like Sulari, has really, I think, done a marvelous job of explaining to the modern reader why Golden Age mysteries work, and bringing back, I give him huge credit for the work that he's done. You might have looked, sorry, Jacob, let me finish. You might have looked in the course of your research at, books by people like H.R.F. Keating or Julian Simmons, who are among the great British crime reviewers, and has written a lot of books that people who are into crime really refer back to. So, there's an awful lot to learn there. Jacob, any questions for Benjamin?
Yeah, we have quite a few, actually.
Good.
So Stefani asks, do you think a locked room mystery can create more of an intimate connection with the characters and the specific situation for the readers?
Yeah, definitely. Also, hi, Stephanie. The great thing about locked rooms is that you get kind of 6 to 10 people. That's kind of what I think you need as suspects. Probably 10's maybe a bit much. 6 to 10 people, set all their backstories and their simmering resentments, put them somewhere together. And then as an author, I see what they do to each other. And I think that brings out things in them that I don't expect when I'm plotting out a book. And it makes it really exciting, and it brings that intimacy and that kind of depth of character and kind of crisscrossing between all the characters that if just speaking from my personal writing style, if I'm moving them around a larger location, such as a city, then my characters are bumping into the characters that they're supposed to bump into because it's in the plot, because I've structured it that way. So they're coming, by the end of the book, it's going to look as natural as it should, but in the terms of the plotting, they're coming out of the plot where I need them to. In a locked room murder mystery, they speak for themselves a little more because you have all those restraints on them, and they are clashing with people that they might not necessarily clash with. So when I was writing this book, we talked about the bar and the restaurant before, and I'm like, okay, I've got these 8 people. Where are the other 2? And then I'd think, oh, I didn't even think about that, because I don't have to isolate their location. If the book is set in New York, it doesn't matter where Greg Smith is. He could be having breakfast. But on a train, it does matter where Greg Smith is, because if he's not in one of these 3 carriages, where is he? So that brings, certainly forced intimacy, and I think it gives a lot of depth and a lot of exciting character beats between unexpected interactions.
Grazie, Stefania. Stefania is joining us from Italy, and I have to say she's always asks absolutely wonderful questions. So I'm always pleased when she's part of the audience.
Oh, cool. I'm going to Italy to launch this book in a week.
Where?
Milan, Rome, and Sorrazzo, I think. Stefania, have a look on Feltrinelli's website. There will be a tour, I think.
Well, you might actually get to meet a Poison Pen guest author. That'd be very exciting, Stefania. Also, try to remember what time of night it is for her while we're doing this, although it's not as late as usual. Right, Jacob.
Well, she also asked whether or not you would ever set a book in Italy.
Oh,
now that you have someone to consult, maybe it's more of a reality.
It's tempting, and I absolutely love my Italian readers. The books are very Australian, so I need to find the right kind of fish out of water plot that my Australian characters are in, so that I could write it effectively. But the temptation of a 3-month research holiday in Italy certainly seems like it should be a good idea for me. So I haven't had any thoughts about taking the books overseas settings, but I'm not ruling it out.
Well, I have 2 ideas I can suggest to you. One, Italy has all kinds of cooking schools that last for at least a week or 2. You could, in Tuscany in particular, also Sicily, or you could have a very small cruise ship or a yacht that, from Australia, destination Italy, or lands in Italy, whatever it is. So
absolutely. You'd have to use the water. My first book was set on a winery vineyard in Australia, which is a shame that I've already used wine as a backdrop, but it was inspired by the town in the first book, is stained red because the wine tanks were on top of the hill and they exploded and flooded the town. And that was inspired by an incident in Tuscany where, if you look it up online, there's wine flowing down the streets. And I just love, for a mystery novel, a town stained red is so great that everything under the ankle is with red wine. So that would have been perfect to set in Tuscany, but I've already done that. But look, I love it. I love new locations. If it's a location that kind of speaks to me, I mean, the train was very much, I wanted to do the Red Desert of Australia, and everyone in my family was very much where I went skiing as a kid. It's not where I grew up, but it's about sort of 3 hours south. And we used to ski around there as a kid, and we used to always go to the snow. And so I really kind of brought that in. So it has to be somewhere I feel like I know intimately so that I can bring it convincingly to the page. I wouldn't want to write a book set in Italy and not do the wonderful spaces justice. But the water, you'd have to use the water, I think, in some way, yeah.
Okay, great. Who inspires you the most as a writer? And what are your ambitions as a writer?
Yeah, inspiration wise, I think I have an amazing respect and admiration for Jane Harper, what she's done for the crime writing genre in Australia and for authors like me, both in terms of, personal support, she's blurbed books of mine, but just in terms of writing great books that have reached the world stage and really had other people say, wow, we want to read more of Australian fiction. I mean, Jane Harper is just an absolute trailblazer in that respect. So definitely I find her very inspiring in terms of what she's achieved. And that's, that's something to look up to. And then in terms of style, I really love I love the Horowitz books. They're fantastic. And I really love Stuart Turton's novels. So The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle is one of my favorite books. And I just think they're so ambitious. Not only are they clever and well done and just really well written and really fun, but it just, and he may not be like this and I've never met him, but he just strikes me as someone who never hits an idea in his manuscript that he thinks is too hard and gives up on it. He's so expert at making the most audacious things work, and I really, really admire that. So Stu Turton is my other one.
Well, he's going to come and join us in May. I'm trying to remember if it's the 19th or I think it's May 19th. Anyway, we've had him once before, and he is indeed fascinating. So, and we Zoomed with him during COVID. So we feel very fortunate to have been able to talk to Stuart about all of his books. So
his new book is fabulous. The Last Murder at the End of the World is really, really great.
Good. Jacob, anything else?
Let's see. The titles of your book are so original and funny. Do you choose it by yourself? And how important is a good title for a book, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think a title is really important. I think it kind of flavors the whole kind of book. We talked about early books before, and when it was published internationally, it had a different title, and it had several different titles in different markets. And I think I found it a bit confusing, and I didn't want to necessarily go through that again. So when I wrote Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, I wrote the title down to start the manuscript, and it's the first sentence of the novel, and it ties into every element of the plot. The structure of the book is based on each family member. It goes through it. So by the time I finished it, it could really only have that title. And I remember my very first kind of conversation about the book with my Australian publisher, who is and always has been amazingly supportive. The discussion of the cover came up, and the phrase was, "It's quite a long title. Maybe we should think about it." Or not maybe we should think about it, but it's quite a long title was kind of offered. And then I finished the book and I'm like, it has to be it. We can't change it. It's the book. It's the whole book. So, and then we got a fabulous cover that made use of the length of the title really effectively. So yeah, I come up with them by myself and I stand by them. But certainly it's a conversation that happens between publisher and author on whether you change a title. I guess I'm just lucky that they like my titles for the most part. And yeah, getting them right, I think is such a key aspect of it. I mean, it's the first thing people see when they pick up the book on the shelf. So I always want a title that kind of has the feel of the book. And how do you capture that in 8 words, 6 words, 4 words? It's a really difficult thing, but if you get it right, I think it pays dividends.
Well, it certainly works in English. Unfortunately, sometimes, titles don't work in another language and they have to be slightly altered to
Oh,
make,
absolutely, yeah.
just like
the Germans thought that the title translated a little bit too threateningly. Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. I think maybe they thought it was nonfiction, or it just felt a little literal, and they're like, let's give it a different title and it will fit better. And so I do appreciate that as well, the nuances of language, and it does have.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I was thinking they probably thought it was a memoir. Yeah, might be more challenging indeed. And we should mention that cover art changes in different markets too. So what may work in Australia may be a whole different thing in like Poland. And so
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
unnerving for authors, to see. We have some authors who bring us their foreign language editions to sell because we have this big international audience. And sometimes you can hardly recognize the book, or you wonder who in the world is going to. As the world's getting more global, it's easier to sell foreign language editions. If and they mostly are because people want to have an autographed copy. Um,
Yeah,
in another
I'm
country.
lucky. I'm very lucky that I've had so many foreign editions, and they're all absolutely stunning. They're all just, I love seeing all the different interpretations
Right.
of the covers that come out. I will say that even in English language markets, I have been in bookstores and seen my book shelved on the memoir shelf. So people read the title and go, "Oh, everyone in my family's killed someone. That must be true crime," and then they put it on the memoir shelf.
Love it. Well, I promise you it's on the right shelf at the Poison Pen.
Oh, good.
Yep,
Thank
we're
you.
doing it. Right. So let me remind everybody once again that we do have autographed copies of Everyone on This Train is a Suspect. And our dream, of course, is to have Benjamin come and visit us. I'm going to send you Stuart Turton's date. Maybe you'd actually like to travel and then you could come and be his host. Wouldn't that be fun?
I mean, it's incredibly tempting.
It's a very
Yeah,
easy flight. It's long, but it's an easy flight from Australia to Phoenix. Just go to LA and then hop over.
Yeah, well, when I am over, I 100% will come in and do an event and say hi. Yeah, I would love that when it works.
Well, it'll be great. All right. So, and when Sulari publishes her Murder on the Orient Express book, we're going to figure out something, because I think it would be really fun for you to have a conversation between you about how you both not only research your books while writing on the train, but what happened to the staff on the train when you began to ask them these penetrating questions. I wasn't there. Right. So, Jacob, was that it? Sorry, I wandered off again. All right. Well, thank you very much, Benjamin. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you. And congratulations on your second best-selling book, which has been greeted with great acclaim everywhere. So don't forget to order one while we still have signed copies, because he's in Australia and our supply, that's it. No more books. All right. Good night.